The first time I saw him, it was in a family photo. Not a blurry background figure, not a stranger passing through. Front row, close to my wife. Close enough that his shoulder touched hers, close enough that the distance between them looked practiced. It was a wedding. Her cousin's. Late summer. The kind of day that makes everyone sweat through their collars and pretend they aren't irritated. We'd driven out early, taken the scenic route, made a whole thing of it because that's what married couples do when they're still performing together. The photographer posted the gallery a week later. I clicked through the photos in the quiet of my office one night, killing time before bed. Most of the shots were what you expect: smiling groups, champagne flutes, dances caught mid-motion. Then I hit the one that made my brain pause. My wife standing in the family cluster, smiling, face angled slightly toward a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't family. I knew her family. I knew the faces, the pairings, the usual groupings. He was new. What bothered me wasn't that he was there. Weddings collect extras. What bothered me was where he stood. He wasn't placed at the edge like a plus one. He was placed near the center, positioned like someone who belonged. And my wife's body leaned toward him in a way that wasn't necessary for a photo. A small thing. The kind of thing you notice only if you know what neutral looks like. I stared at that image longer than I should have, then forced myself to keep scrolling. A few photos later, he appeared again. Different angle, same proximity, then again, then again. By the time I closed the gallery, I had a new word in my head, one that didn't feel dramatic enough to justify how cold I suddenly felt. Familiar. He looked familiar to her, and she looked familiar to him. I didn't confront her. Not that night, not the next day, because one photo is nothing. It's easy to be paranoid when you want a story to be true. Instead, I filed it away as a minor anomaly and went back to normal life. But the thing about anomalies is that once you notice one, you start noticing the others that were already there. The next one was her sister. My wife and her sister had always been close. Close in the way that felt like a private alliance. They talked daily, they had their own jokes, their own little language. It never bothered me because I'd always assumed closeness was healthy. Then her sister's behavior changed toward me. It wasn't hostile. It was careful. Shorter conversations. Less eye contact. A certain stiffness around the edges, like she was trying not to reveal something by accident. I noticed it the way you notice a door that doesn't quite latch anymore. Nothing breaks loudly. It just stops fitting right. And my wife became easier to disrespect me around. That's how it started. Small corrections that weren't corrections. Comments that sounded like jokes but landed like contempt. Little digs delivered in front of others because she'd started trusting that I wouldn't react. She rolled her eyes at me when I talked too long. She cut in mid-sentence, fixing my words as if I couldn't be trusted to represent myself accurately. At home, she got sharper, less patient, less interested in how I felt about anything, and underneath all of it was confidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't come from happiness. It comes from having an alternative. The first time the alternative became unmistakable was 2 months after the wedding. Her sister hosted a small birthday dinner at her place. Nothing big, a few people, food, music, the usual noise of family trying to be fun. I got there late because of work and walked in to see my wife in the kitchen laughing harder than I'd heard her laugh in months. He was there. The man from the wedding photos. He turned as I entered, and his expression didn't shift the way a stranger's would. There was no polite uncertainty, no introduction-ready posture. He looked at me like he already knew who I was. Not in a threatening way, in a familiar way. That was the first moment my stomach tightened into something closer to certainty. My wife introduced him with a first name only, like it didn't matter, like I wouldn't ask, like it was normal for him to be there. Her sister didn't look at me while it happened. She kept her focus on plates and utensils, her hands moving too quickly, like activity could disguise discomfort. That dinner was the first time I felt like I was sitting in my own life as a guest. It wasn't just the presence of the man, it was the choreography around him. He was offered the good chair. He was served first. He was spoken to with warmth that felt automatic. My wife touched his arm once while laughing, casually, briefly, like she didn't even notice she was doing it. I noticed. Everything in me wanted to stand up and end it right there. But that impulse wasn't strength. It was emotional release. It would have given them something to call me. Unstable, jealous, dramatic. So I did what I always do when reality stops matching the story I've been living. I waited and I watched. Over the next few weeks, he kept appearing. Not randomly, predictably. Always around her sister. Always in spaces where he could be framed as just part of the circle. Always just plausible enough to avoid questions. My wife began disappearing more often, and the explanation shifted. She wasn't just busy. She was helping her sister, running errands, dropping something off, staying to talk. It sounded harmless, but it happened too consistently to be harmless, and her disrespect intensified alongside it. When someone is cheating, they often become cruel at home, not always loudly, sometimes in a slow, steady drip. They downgrade you in their mind to justify the split. They treat you like you're failing so they can feel less guilty about betraying you. That's what it felt like she needed me to be smaller so she could be bigger. The proof arrived in a way that didn't require technology, spying, or luck. It arrived through a family group message. Her sister posted a photo from a weekend trip, just scenery and drinks at first, nothing suspicious. Everyone reacted with the usual comments and emojis. Then she posted another, a group shot taken at night, some kind of outdoor patio, warm lighting, people crowded together. My wife was in it. He was in it. His hand was on her waist, not on her shoulder, not on her back in a casual, everyone squeeze in way. Low on her waist, firm, possessive. Her body angled toward him, her face turned toward his, smiling in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. Her sister had posted it like it was normal, like no one would question it, like the only person who might be surprised wouldn't see it or wouldn't matter. That night, I didn't confront my wife. I confronted reality. I went to bed in the guest room and locked the door, not because I feared her, but because I needed a boundary I could feel. The next morning, I asked her something simple, what that photo was. She didn't deny it. She laughed like I was being ridiculous. She told me I was reading too much into things. She told me family trips included lots of people. She told me he was just around. Her tone was the same one she'd used for months whenever I questioned anything. Dismissive, superior, irritated that I dared. That dismissiveness was the second betrayal. It meant she wasn't just cheating. She was comfortable cheating. Comfortable enough to disrespect my intelligence, comfortable enough to let her sister help. That was the engine behind everything, not just an affair, but an enabled affair. A small network of people treating me like an obstacle to manage. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I asked one question that couldn't be softened. Was she sleeping with him? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes shifted, just briefly, just enough to show calculation. Then she did something arrogant people do when they think they have leverage. She told me it wasn't my business anymore. That sentence did something to me. It didn't make me explode. It made me settle. Because once someone says that, the marriage is already over. The only question left is whether you end it cleanly or let it rot. I left the house that day and drove without a destination until my breathing was steady again. When I got back, I didn't go to her. I went to my desk and started building a file. Not revenge, a record. Dates of appearances, photos from the group message, screenshots of timestamps, notes about the wedding gallery, the dinner where he'd looked at me like he already knew me. I scheduled my own STI panel the next week, quietly through normal channels. It wasn't drama. It was due diligence. If she was sleeping with someone else, and she was, then my health needed reality, not hope. While waiting for results, I made a second decision. I met with an attorney, not to start a war, to understand the landscape, what mattered, what didn't, how separation actually works in real time, what timelines look like, what I needed to do now so I didn't regret it later. I learned quickly that the legal system doesn't care about humiliation the way people do. It cares about assets, obligations, stability, documentation. It moves slowly and punishes impulsiveness. That suited me because I wasn't looking for a dramatic confrontation. I was looking for an ending that didn't leave me paying for her choices longer than necessary. My test results came back negative. Relief hit first, then anger, Because relief is what you feel when you realize how far your life had drifted into risk you never agreed to. A week later, my wife came home late again. Not frantic, not guilty, confident. She moved through the house like she owned the air. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't care. She spoke to me with the same tone she'd used lately, annoyed as if my presence was inconvenient. Then she said something that exposed how deep the rot went. She told me her sister thought I was being difficult. Her sister. As if my wife's sister had a vote on whether I deserved basic respect in my own marriage. That's when I understood the scale of the betrayal. It wasn't just a man and my wife. It was a small coalition. And coalitions fall apart when the person being managed stops participating. That night, I didn't threaten. I didn't fight. I simply told her we were separating inside the house immediately, and that all communication would be logistical going forward. She laughed again. She said I wouldn't do anything. She said I didn't have the spine. That's what arrogance sounds like when it thinks it's safe. I let her believe it. Once I stopped engaging, the balance shifted. She noticed it immediately. Arrogant people are sensitive to silence. They mistake attention for power, and when the attention disappears, they start testing the edges to see if it comes back. She tested me with sarcasm first, little remarks thrown into the air like bait. When I didn't bite, she escalated. She accused me of being cold, then controlling, then dramatic. Each accusation contradicted the last, but consistency was never the point. Reaction was. I gave her none. What I did give her was structure. I moved my clothes into the guest room properly this time. Not a few items, everything. I took my documents, my laptop, my personal files. I stopped sharing meals. I stopped filling the quiet with small talk. I spoke only when logistics required it, and even then, briefly. That restraint unsettled her more than anger ever would have. She tried to reassert dominance publicly. At a family gathering a week later, she made a point of being loud, charming, expansive. She touched his arm again, more deliberately this time. She laughed too hard. She watched me from across the room to see if I would react. I didn't. That was when her sister stepped in. Her sister cornered me near the kitchen, speaking in that hushed, urgent tone people use when they think they're being helpful. She told me I was misinterpreting things. She told me I was making everyone uncomfortable. She told me my wife was going through a lot and needed support, not judgment. I listened until she finished. Then I said something I hadn't said out loud yet. I told her I knew about the affair, not with anger, not as an accusation, as a statement. Her sister's face changed instantly. The careful neutrality vanished. She didn't ask how I knew. She didn't deny it. She didn't even pretend surprise. She asked how much I knew. That question closed the loop. It confirmed what I'd already understood. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a secret slipping through cracks. It was a managed situation, a shared understanding, a quiet agreement that my ignorance was convenient. I walked away without finishing the conversation. That night, my wife exploded. Not in tears, in rage. She accused me of humiliating her. She accused me of turning her family against her. She accused me of trying to control the narrative. She said I was punishing her for being honest about what she wanted. She never denied the affair. Not once. She framed it as inevitability, as growth, as something I should have seen coming if I'd been paying attention. That framing was her last attempt at superiority. I told her we would now be communicating through attorneys. She laughed again, but this time it sounded thinner. She said she wasn't afraid. She said she knew how this would go. She said she had nothing to worry about. Confidence without preparation is just noise. The legal process began quietly. Requests, disclosures, timelines. She treated it like a formality at first, something to get through. She answered questions loosely, assuming her presence and personality would smooth over inconsistencies. It didn't. The problem with arrogance is that it makes people careless, and carelessness leaves trails. Her spending came under review. Nothing outrageous, nothing headline-worthy, just patterns. Trips that didn't align with explanations. Dining expenses clustered around specific dates. Purchases that correlated with time she claimed to be elsewhere. When questioned, she became defensive. She insisted none of it mattered. She said people were nitpicking. She said everyone was obsessed with punishing her. That defensiveness worked against her. Meanwhile, the affair partner stayed cautious. He never contacted me, never confronted her publicly, never inserted himself into the conflict. He did what careful people do when exposure increases. He withdrew just enough to protect himself. That withdrawal infuriated her. She had believed he was part of her future, a reward waiting on the other side of this mess. When he began responding less, canceling plans, becoming vague, the reality she'd avoided came into focus. She had risked everything for something that wasn't stable enough to hold her. That realization didn't make her reflective. It made her reckless. She began pushing harder in mediation, demanding more, interrupting, speaking over professionals who had no interest in her tone. She tried to assert moral leverage where none existed. Every time she did, she weakened her position. There was a moment, small, quiet, easy to miss, when her confidence finally broke. The mediator asked a simple question about a date. She answered quickly. The attorney on the other side referenced a document. The dates didn't match. Silence filled the room. Her attorney leaned over and spoke to her in a low voice. Not urgently, not emotionally, just clearly. When she looked up again, her posture had changed. The arrogance was gone. What replaced it wasn't humility. It was calculation stripped of fantasy. She realized she was no longer negotiating from strength. The settlement that followed reflected that. It wasn't vindictive, it wasn't dramatic, it was precise. It accounted for shared assets fairly. It acknowledged the marriage without rewarding deception. It placed boundaries where she had assumed there would be leniency. She accepted it because she had no better option. The house went on the market soon after. I moved out before the first showing. Not because I had to, but because I wanted clean separation. I didn't want to watch strangers walk through rooms that had already stopped feeling like mine. She stayed, alone. The sale closed without issue. The divorce finalized months later. No courtroom theatrics, no speeches, no apologies, just signatures and silence. Time did what it always does. It clarified. I rebuilt slowly, not out of fear, but out of respect for what had been dismantled. I learned to trust patterns again. I learned to listen when something felt off instead of dismissing it to keep the peace. I didn't rush into anything new. I didn't need to prove I was fine. I was. I heard through mutual connections that she struggled afterward. Not financially, socially. Arrogance doesn't travel well once it's been exposed. It requires an audience willing to play along. She found a quieter life eventually, somewhere else, with different people. We do not communicate. Not because of unresolved anger, because nothing remains to be resolved. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the assumption that I would accept being managed, minimized, and disrespected indefinitely. She was wrong, and when that realization finally landed, it didn't come with fireworks. It came with paperwork and an ending she hadn't planned for. Thank you for listening. If you found this story worth hearing, please like, share, and subscribe. And before you go, drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done in this situation. And until next time, take care.